Some encounters change the course of two lives in a single instant. The sun was setting over Cedar Ridge when Billy Campbell heard the horse's hooves approaching his property. He was repairing the corral fence, calloused hands clutching the barbed wire, when he looked up and saw the silhouette of a woman riding a sorrel horse. She came slowly, staggering in the saddle, as if each movement cost an immense effort. Billy dropped his tools and walked toward the dirt road that led to his house. The warm breeze of the late afternoon carried the smell of dust and mugwort, and the silence of the desert was broken only by the creaking of boots against the dry ground. There was something wrong with that scene. The woman did not control the animal well, and her hunched posture suggested exhaustion or worse. As she got closer, Billy could see her pale face under the wide-brimmed hat. Her lips were parched, and her blue eyes looked blurred, as if she was struggling to stay conscious. The travel dress, which must once have been elegant, was now covered with road dust and crumpled by the long journey. The woman tried to dismount, but her legs gave way the moment her feet touched the ground. Billy ran over and held her before she collapsed completely, feeling how fragile and trembling her body was. She mumbled something incomprehensible, and he noticed that his hands were cold despite the heat of the day. In her dress pocket, Billy found a folded letter and a piece of paper with his own name written on it. She was a mail-order bride, Jennifer Walsh, 23 years. She had come from Boston to marry him, based on the letters they had exchanged over the past 6 months. But Billy had never sent any letters to Boston, had never asked for a wife, had never heard of Jennifer Walsh. He carried the unconscious woman into the house, placing her in the only bed he had. The cabin was simple but clean, with wooden furniture that he had built himself. The stone fireplace occupied an entire wall, and the small windows let in the golden light of the evening. Billy prepared fresh water and soaked a clean cloth to put on her forehead. While taking care of the stranger, he examined the letter again. The handwriting was masculine, and the words spoke of a gentleman who sought companionship and a quiet life in the West. Someone had used her name to deceive that woman, bringing her across the entire country based on a lie. When Jennifer started to move, Billy pulled away a bit, giving her room to wake up without any scares. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking several times before she was able to focus on the strange environment around her. Her gaze met his, and Billy saw fear and confusion mingle in her delicate features. The light from the oil lamp danced on the wooden walls, creating soft shadows that seemed to shield the small space from the hostile vastness of the desert outside. Billy remained silent, waiting for her to get her bearings, knowing that any sudden movement could scare her even more. There was something in her blue eyes that spoke of old suffering, of wounds that went beyond the fatigue of the journey. Jennifer tried to sit up, but the dizziness made her return to the pillow. She looked at Billy with a mixture of gratitude and fear, as if she didn't know if he was her salvation or another threat. The night wind was beginning to blow outside, making the wood of the cabin groan softly, as if the house itself sighed under the weight of the secrets it now harbored. Billy realized that that night would change everything in his lonely life. He did not yet know who had created that hoax, nor why anyone would send an innocent woman to the middle of nowhere based on lies. But one thing he knew for sure. Jennifer Walsh was under his wing now, and he wouldn't let anyone hurt her again. The truth has the weight of a stone in its chest, but sometimes it is the only thing that can free two lost souls. Jennifer woke up to the aroma of strong coffee and bacon frying in the iron skillet. The morning light filtered through the simple curtains, and for a moment she forgot where she was. The bed was comfortable, the sheets smelled of homemade soap and lavender, and there was a comforting silence she hadn't experienced in months. Then the memory came back like a cold wave, and she remembered the long journey, the fainting, the gentle eyes of the man who had rescued her. Billy had his back to her, fiddling something on the wood stove. His movements were careful and precise, like someone used to taking care of himself. He wore a light blue cotton shirt and leather pants, and Jennifer noticed how his broad shoulders filled the fabric without exaggeration. There was a tranquility in his posture that made her feel safe, even though she didn't know him well. When he turned around and saw her awake, Billy offered a small, gentle smile. Her brown eyes were warm, with no trace of the harshness she had learned to fear in male faces. He approached slowly, as if he knew that sudden movements could scare her, and placed a glass of fresh water on the small table next to the bed. Jennifer drank slowly, feeling the water soothe her parched throat. Billy waited for her to finish before speaking, his voice low and soft as the murmur of a distant stream. He explained that she had passed out the night before, that he had found her with the letters, and that there was something very wrong with the whole situation. Not in an accusatory way, but with genuine concern. Confusion took over Jennifer's face when Billy showed her the letters she had received, comparing them to his own handwriting on old documents. It was obvious that someone had forged the correspondence, creating a non-existent Billy Campbell who promised love and security to a desperate woman. The real Billy had never written those words, had never asked for a wife, had never made the promises that had brought her there. Jennifer felt the world come crashing down again. She had sold everything she owned in Boston to pay for the trip. She had left behind the only life she knew, fleeing a situation that had become impossible to bear. The tears came without warning, silent and bitter, carrying the weight of all the broken dreams and betrayed hopes. Billy remained there, not trying to console her with empty words or easy promises. He simply stood by, offering his solid presence as a safe haven in the midst of the storm that shook her heart. When Jennifer was finally able to speak, her voice came out broken and full of pain. She told about Boston, about the powerful man who wouldn't take no for an answer, about the threats that forced her to seek refuge on the other side of the country. Her story unfolded like a ball of dark wool, revealing months of fear and despair. The suitor in Boston was influential and dangerous, and he had made it clear that he would not give up easily. Jennifer had seen in Billy Campbell's letters a chance to escape, to start over in a place where her past could not reach her. Now he discovered that even that hope had been built on lies. Billy listened to everything without interrupting, his jaw twitching slightly as she mentioned the threats and fear. There was something about his expression that changed during the narrative, a harshness that wasn't there before, as if he was making an important decision. When Jennifer finished speaking, he stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the vastness of the desert that stretched to the horizon. The silence lasted between them, filled only by the ticking of the wall clock and the distant murmur of the wind. Jennifer waited, not knowing what to expect, fearing he would send her away now that he knew the truth about her situation. She had no money to go back, nowhere else to go, and the idea of facing the world alone again terrified her. When Billy turned to her, there was determination in his brown eyes. He said it didn't matter who had written the letters or why someone had used his name. What mattered was that Jennifer was there now, in need of help, and he wasn't the kind of man who abandoned someone in need. He offered her protection, her home, and time for her to decide what to do next. The proposal was simple and honest, with no hidden demands or romantic expectations. Jennifer could stay until she recovers and decides her next move. Billy had slept in the barn the night before, and he would continue to do so as long as she needed the house. It was pure kindness, offered by a stranger who owed her nothing, and Jennifer felt something inside her chest warm up for the first time in months. Breakfast was a quiet but comfortable meal, with Billy respecting the emotional space she needed to process everything that had happened. Jennifer observed his economical and efficient movements, the way he treated even everyday objects with care, and began to understand that he had found someone genuinely good in a world that seemed to have forgotten about kindness. The past has a cruel way of finding those who try to flee from it, even in the most distant lands. 3 weeks had passed since Jennifer's arrival, and the simple routine of the farm had brought a peace she hadn't known in years. She would wake up to the crowing of roosters and the aroma of coffee Billy brewed before dawn. help with household chores, and spend afternoons sewing on the porch, watching him work with the cattle. There was a quiet harmony between them, built on mutual respect and small, everyday pleasantries. Billy kept his word to sleep in the barn, but their conversations over meals had become longer and more natural. He talked about the land, about the animals, about the plans to expand the herd. Jennifer shared memories of Boston, the libraries she frequented, the books she loved to read. They found that they both enjoyed the silence of the evening and the sound of rain on the metal roof. That Thursday morning, Jennifer was hanging clothes on the clothesline when she saw a cloud of dust approaching from the road. 3 knights were coming towards the property, and something in her rigid and determined posture made her feel butterflies in her stomach. She ran into the house and called Billy, who was fixing a harness on the kitchen table. Billy stepped out onto the porch with Jennifer behind him, and his eyes narrowed as he recognized the man leading the group. Thomas Wheeler, a wealthy Denver merchant who had tried to buy his land several times over the past 2 years. He always offered prices far above market value, but Billy had never understood the sudden interest in his modest estate. Now, seeing Wheeler arrive accompanied by 2 armed men, he began to suspect that there was more behind those offers. Wheeler dismounted with calculated movements, dusting off his expensive jacket and adjusting the hat. He was a man in his 50s, with a neatly trimmed beard and eyes cold as river stones. His companions remained mounted, their hands resting near the guns in a non-casual fashion. The tension in the air was palpable, like electricity before a storm. The merchant greeted Billy with a false cordiality, but his eyes immediately fixed on Jennifer. She felt her blood run cold when she saw the recognition pass over his face, followed by a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Wheeler commented on the beauty of the property and Billy's luck to have found such delightful company, his words laden with hidden meanings. Jennifer instinctively retreated closer to Billy, and he noticed her movement. Without hesitation, Billy wrapped his arm around her shoulders, a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Wheeler. The merchant laughed softly, as if he had confirmed some suspicion, and commented that small ranches like that were vulnerable to all kinds of problems. Accidents happened, animals were lost, buildings caught fire without explanation. The veiled threat hung in the air like acrid smoke. Billy stiffened beside Jennifer, but his voice remained calm as he said that his property was very well protected and that he had no interest in selling it to anyone. Wheeler nodded slowly, as if expecting exactly that answer, and said that sometimes circumstances change people's perspectives on business. Before leaving, Wheeler addressed Jennifer directly, asking if she was enjoying the dry climate of Colorado after the humidity of Boston. The specific comment about her hometown confirmed her worst fears. Somehow Wheeler knew who she was and where she had come from. His predatory smile made it clear that his escape had been discovered and that his refuge was compromised. After the 3 men left, Jennifer collapsed into a chair on the porch, shaking like a leaf in the wind. Billy knelt beside her, holding her cold hands between his, warm and firm. She told of the suspicions she had harbored for weeks, of the feeling of being watched, of the nightmares that woke her up in the middle of the night with the certainty that someone had found her. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place in Billy's mind. The insistent offers for her land, the forged letters that brought Jennifer there, the arrival of Wheeler right after her. Someone had orchestrated all of this, using Jennifer as bait to force him to sell the property. But why was his land so important? What did Wheeler really want? Billy walked to the barn and returned with a shotgun, checking to see if it was loaded before leaning it against the porch wall. Jennifer watched him with wide eyes, realizing that the situation had become much more dangerous than she had imagined. He sat down next to her and explained that he would not abandon her, no matter who came after her or what the threats were. The night arrived loaded with tension and expectation. Billy insisted that Jennifer sleep in the house while he stood guard in the barn, from where he could see the entire property. She argued that she didn't want to put him in danger because of her, but he was adamant. There was something in his eyes that spoke of unwavering determination, as if he had made a silent promise to protect her against any threat. Jennifer spent hours awake, listening to every noise of the night, every movement of the wind in the trees. Through the window, she could see Billy's silhouette in the barn, watchful as a sentinel. The full moon bathed the property in its silvery light, creating long shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. She knew that Wheeler's arrival had changed everything, and that the peace of the last few days had come to an end. In the heart of the night, a strange sound made her get out of bed. It wasn't the familiar noises of the farm, but something different, stealthy. Jennifer approached the window and saw dark figures moving near the corral. His blood ran cold when he realized it wasn't Billy. Someone had trespassed on the property, and she needed to warn him before it was too late. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. Jennifer didn't hesitate. She took the lamp from the kitchen table and waved through the window toward the barn, creating a sign she hoped Billy would understand. The light danced on the glass for a few seconds before it turned off, plunging the house into darkness again. Her heart was beating so hard that it seemed to echo through the wooden walls, and her hands trembled as she waited for some sign that Billy had heard the warning. From the barn, Billy saw the flashing light and understood immediately. He had spent years in the Wild West before settling down as a farmer, and his instincts were still razor-bladed. He grabbed his rifle and moved silently up the side of the barn, using the shadows to camouflage himself as he watched the invaders. There were 4 men, not 3, as they had arrived during the day. They moved with the confidence of someone who was used to this kind of work, dividing themselves to surround the house on all 4 sides. Billy recognized the tactic. They wanted to make sure no one escaped. Their plan likely involved forcing him to sign the property deed or worse. Jennifer waited a few eternal minutes before she saw Billy's familiar silhouette approaching the house from behind. He gestured for her to move away from the window and hide behind the heavy oak table. As he walked through the back door, moving like a shadow, Jennifer felt immense relief mixed with growing terror. Billy whispered quick instructions. Jennifer was supposed to crouch behind the desk while he dealt with the situation. If something went wrong, she was to run to the barn and get the horse, following the trail that led to the nearest town. She grabbed his arm, her eyes pleading with him not to take any chances, but Billy covered her hand with his and muttered the words she would never forget. "No one's going to hurt you again." The first intruder tried to force the front door with a crowbar. The sound of metal against the wood echoed through the silent house, followed by heavy footsteps on the porch. Billy positioned himself behind the wall, rifle ready, breathing slowly to control his adrenaline. He knew every board in that house, every sound it produced, and he would use that advantage. When the door opened with a bang, Billy acted. The first man who entered received the rifle handle in his stomach, bending over in pain before collapsing to the ground. The second hesitated for a split second, long enough for Billy to disarm and immobilize as well. The screams of the companions alerted the other 2 who were waiting outside. Jennifer watched from behind the desk, impressed by Billy's quiet efficiency. He moved like someone who had faced similar situations before, each move calculated and precise. There was no unnecessary cruelty in his actions, just the cold determination to protect what mattered. The third intruder tried to enter through the kitchen window, but Billy had already positioned himself to intercept him. The fight was brief and quickly decided. The fourth man, seeing that the plan had failed, tried to get away on horseback, but Billy ran after him and managed to knock him off his horse with a precise lasso. With the 4 intruders tied up and unarmed in the room, Billy lit all the lamps in the house. Jennifer stood up slowly, still trembling, but with a new admiration shining in her eyes. She had seen Billy defend not only his property, but also herself, with a determination that went beyond courtesy or duty. Billy interrogated the men with the patience of someone who knew that the truth always came out eventually. Under pressure, The leader of the group revealed that Wheeler had hired to scare Billy into selling the land. They mentioned something about a railroad that would pass through the area, and how Billy's estate was on the perfect way to an important station. The revelation explained everything. Wheeler didn't just want Billy's land, but he had discovered inside information about the layout of the new railroad. The property was worth a fortune if it was used as a train stop, and Wheeler had orchestrated the whole fake letter scheme to get what he wanted. Jennifer had been a cog in his game, used to distract Billy or to blackmail him emotionally. Jennifer felt a mixture of anger and relief. Anger at having been manipulated so cruelly, but relief at finally understanding that her arrival there had not been just coincidence or bad luck. There were larger forces at work, and both she and Billy had fallen victim to the same greedy man. Billy tied up the raiders with sturdy ropes and locked them in the barn to wait for the next morning's sheriff. He made sure they were safe but not seriously injured, showing a compassion that impressed Jennifer. Even after being attacked in his own home, Billy did not seek revenge, only justice. When they returned home, Jennifer approached Billy with a gratitude that went beyond words. She had seen men fight before, but she had never seen anyone fight specifically to protect her. The difference was profound and touched a part of her heart that she thought had closed off forever after the experiences in Boston. Billy checked that she hadn't been injured during the confusion, his gentle hands scanning her arms and face for any signs of injury. Jennifer noticed how careful he was even in the most tense moments, how his first concern was always her well-being. It was a kindness she didn't know still existed in the world. Dawn arrived with a sense of liberation. The immediate danger had passed, and the truth about Wheeler had finally come to light. Jennifer knew they would still have to face the merchant and his powerful connections, but for the first time since she had left Boston, she didn't feel alone in the fight. Billy brewed strong coffee for both of them, and they sat on the porch to wait for dawn. The fresh dawn air carried the scent of wildflowers and the promise of a new day. Jennifer looked at the man next to her, realizing that at some point during those weeks he had become so much more than just her protector. The stars still shone faintly in the sky that was beginning to lighten, silent witnesses of a night that had changed everything between them. Jennifer knew that when the sun fully rose, they would have to make important decisions about the future. But in that moment, sitting next to Billy with a hot cup of coffee in her hands, she felt safer than she had ever felt in her entire life. True love doesn't come with grandiose promises, but with small gestures that build a lifetime. The sheriff arrived in the morning sun, accompanied by 3 deputies and a wagon to carry the prisoners. Billy turned the men in and told the whole story, including Wheeler's fake letters and threats. The sheriff, an experienced man named Morton, was aware of the dubious reputation of the Denver merchant and promised to investigate his activities further. Jennifer watched Billy talk to the authorities, noting how he spoke clearly and honestly, without trying to boast about what he had done. He mentioned her courage in sounding the alarm and how her presence of mind had helped resolve the situation. It was typical of him to give credit to others, even when the merit was clearly his own. After everyone left, the property returned to familiar silence. Billy fixed the front door while Jennifer prepared a neat lunch, as if the normality of the routine could erase the events of the previous night. But there was something different in the air between them, a new intimacy born of shared danger and absolute trust. During the meal, Jennifer finally found the courage to talk about what she felt. She said she intended to stay, not as a refugee or as someone seeking protection, but as a woman who had chosen where she wanted to build her life. She said that she had found in Billy something she never knew she was looking for, a man who respected her, who protected her without controlling her, who saw in her a partner and not a possession. Billy put his fork on the plate and looked her in the eye for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an emotion that he rarely showed. He said that she had brought something to that house that he didn't know was missing. Not just company, but purpose, joy. a reason to wake up each morning with hope in your heart. 2 weeks later, news arrived that Wheeler had been arrested for falsifying documents and attempted extortion. Other victims of his schemes had come forward to testify, and the merchant would face years in prison. The threat had completely disappeared, leaving Billy and Jennifer free to build the future they chose. On Saturday afternoon, Billy found Jennifer reading on the porch, the golden evening sun illuminating her brown hair. He sat next to her, and for the first time since they met, took her hand in a deliberate and affectionate way. Jennifer intertwined her fingers in his, feeling the calm force that always reassured her. They talked about practical plans, expanding the house, planting a bigger garden, maybe raising chickens. Simple conversations about a simple life, but loaded with deep meaning. It was the kind of conversation that couples in love have, planning a future together without haste, savoring every moment of construction. As the stars began to appear in the sky, Billy turned to Jennifer with a question in his eyes. She nodded before he even spoke, and when he whispered if she would agree to marry him, for real this time, her answer came as a happy sigh, yes. Their kiss was as soft as the night breeze, loaded with promises that both intended to fulfill. There was no urgency or despair, just the quiet certainty of two people who had found their place in the world alongside each other. 6 months later, the small church of Cedar Ridge witnessed the most beautiful wedding the city had ever seen. Jennifer wore a simple white cotton dress that she had sewn herself, and Billy wore his best suit, with his hair combed and a smile that lit up his entire face. Sheriff Morton was the witness, and half a dozen neighbors showed up to celebrate. The ceremony was simple but sincere, sealed with vows they both wrote, promising to care for each other, respect each other's dreams, and build a life together based on true love and mutual trust. The former mail-order bride had found her home, not in the fake letters that brought her there, but in the genuine heart of the man who had taken her in when she needed it most. And Billy has found that sometimes life's best gifts come in unexpected ways, bringing not only love, but also the chance to be the best version of himself. They lived happily, not because they did not face difficulties, but because they faced them together. And on the starry nights of Colorado, when the wind blew gently across the prairie, you could still hear them talking quietly on the porch, planning for tomorrow with the confidence of those they had met forever. If this story of courage and true love has touched your heart, you can't miss our upcoming adventures of the American Wild West, where brave men and women face their fears and discover that sometimes fate takes us exactly where we need to be. Subscribe to the channel to follow more stories of redemption, protection, and second chances under the relentless desert sun, and leave your comment below telling what was the most exciting moment of this Billy and Jennifer journey for you.